Thanks, Oscar. So apparently, Oscar has done an amazing job in programming. So if you combine DiffOpt with DisjunctiveProgramming.jl, that's going to be my talk, essentially. You can take a 15 more minutes coffee break if you wish. So the idea here we are doing is essentially embedding a disjunctive programming layer as a projection layer in a neural network, and then that can help some machine learning problems. So to motivate this work a little bit, if you look at many of the modern day deep learning works, right? So these are the commonly used benchmark in machine learning, things like image recognition or natural language processing. One common theme of this deep learning work is that the data set size is quite large, right? Like ImageNet has 40 million data set. But unfortunately, in some of the engineering applications, we don't have the luxury of so many data points, right? So I work in chemical engineering. So one of the applications is you want to detect anomalies in a chemical plant. For that, you will need the faulty data that has occurred before in a chemical plant. But apparently, we don't have that much faulty data. And in some biomedical research, the data are very expensive to collect, right? Collecting biomedical images are much more expensive than, let's say, labeling cats and dogs in image recognition. So to further motivate that, I'm going to present a motivating application I'm going to use in the benchmark data set, which is called cell classification. So it's a biomedical application. So we know that in a human body, there are different types of cells, right? You have your blood cell, your muscle cell. What the biomedical researchers really care a lot about is the cancer cells, right? Because if they invented a new way of treating cancer, they want to know before and after the treatment, the concentration of the cancer cells change, right? So how do we know a cell is a cancer cell versus a healthy cell? So there is an experimental method. I'm not going to the details, but you can imagine for each of the cell in your body, you can apply this technique called RNA sequencing to get the number of genes in these cells, right? So essentially, for each of the cell in your body, you can get a vector, right? So it's an n-dimensional vector. Each dimension is a number of genes expressed in that cell. The machine learning researchers have studied this problem. Right? It has been very well studied. You can take this vector, which has the gene expression account, and you have a deep learning model to tell you what is a cell type. Right? So it's essentially a classification problem to solve. But these experimental techniques is very expensive. So I talked to one of my colleagues doing this type of research. Each of the sample costs around $3,000. For some of the cells, you don't have a lot of data. You don't want to spend too much money on just running experiments to train your machine learning model. But fortunately, the biomedical researchers have very good domain knowledge about this problem. So what they have studied is something called marker genes. Right? So you can think about the marker genes as a subset of the genes in this whole vector. Right? Maybe for each of the cell, you can collect 10 marker genes, and it will help you to classify the cell types. Right? So you can think about this can be represented as a disjunctive program. Right? So essentially what it says is if some subset of the genes are highly expressed, then I know my cells are likely to be a subset of cells. Right? So you can write a disjunctive over the probability of the cell types. Right? So any of them greater than or equal to a probability threshold they set. And you will see it in a second using these type of heuristic rules can help the machine learning when you don't have a lot of data. Okay, so hopefully I convince you there are some applications embedding disjunctive rules might be interesting. Right? So the idea is we want to embed those rules into a deep learning model. Right? So if the deep learning output does not satisfy those rules, we can project to this feasible set, then they can satisfy the rules. Okay, so what are the challenges in this type of rules? One of the questions mentioned, right, this is not differentiable, right? Because if you think about, you want to project the output to a disjunction, right? Either the y is in the left box or the y is in the right box, right? So this is not a continuous region, therefore you cannot do differential optimization layers directly. So just to summarize a little bit about the literature, this is a rule we would like to embed. Right? So we represent a rule as follows. Given X in this set A, right? So this A set can be any complex set you want to enforce, right? So this rule is input dependent. If X is in the set A, then that implies the output Y is in a disjunction, right? So here we use CR to represent a disjunctive set, right? So each of the CR can be represented as a union of polyhedral, right? So this is essentially what disjunctive programming is about, right? You can enforce multiple disjunctive constraints simultaneously as well. Now there are many works in this area. The machine learning people call it neural symbolic learning. Right? So the machine learning people typically use some tools like fuzzy logic to enforce constraint. For example, one of the references is like DL2 or semantic laws. Essentially, they are enforcing sort of a soft constraint as an approximation to those logic rules. But since we are in the optimization world, we know there are many tools in optimization we can use to help this neural symbolic learning problem. And then the property we want to satisfy is that we want to embed both logic and linear constraints, and we want to have hard satisfaction of the constraints, and the constraint can be dependent on the input. Right? So if you check all those boxes, as far as we know, we are the only method that can satisfy all those properties. So how do we do that? We are going to use some techniques in disjunctive programming. I guess Daniel already talked about this convex Hall relaxation. So let's suppose you have two polyhedral set. Your constraint is in either of these polyhedral set. Well, it's not a continuous set, but you can get a convex Hall. There is a extended form LP formulation proposed by Ballas many decades ago, right? Now, what if you have multiple rules, right? So let's say we have two sets of rules. The first set of rules is saying it's in either S11 or S12. Then we have a second set of rules saying that the constraint should be S21 and S22, right? So now the intersect you want to get is essentially these two regions are your only feasible set, right? If you intersect two disjunctive sets. So there are different ways you can come up with a relaxation. One thing is called a conjunctive normal form. The idea is that let's first get a convex Hall of S11 and S12. Then you get a convex Hall of S21 and S22. Right now you intersect with these two convex Hall, and then you get a so-called conjunctive normal form. It's an intersection of the convex Hall. As you can see, the conjunctive normal form is not the convex Hall of the original problem. There is something called disjunctive normal form where you can get the convex Hall, right? So which you have to enumerate all the possible intersections, right? So let's first intersect S1 with S21, then you get this intersection, and similarly you can get another intersection with second rule set. But if you intersect S11, S12 with S22, it's an empty intersection. Now you are done, right? So what you have is the convex Hall over sort of the intersection of all the possible disjuncts, right? So essentially, you first do all the intersections, then you take the convex Hall. So just to summarize, the conjunctive normal form is easier to compute. It grows linearly, but the disjunctive normal form will grow exponentially. The nice thing of the disjunctive normal form is that you can get a convex Hall of the disjunctive program, right? So this was commonly known in the literature of disjunctive programming. So now one thing you might realize is that even though we get the disjunctive normal form, not all the points in the convex Hall are feasible. Right? So if you directly project to the disjunctive normal form, you may not satisfy the rules, right? You may not get the exact rule satisfaction. So to get the exact rule satisfaction, the trick we use is we sort of lift that into a higher dimensional space by using this epigraph variable, right? So this eta variable can be seen as the lifted variable for the one norm distance to this convex Hall. Okay, so with that, so here's the theorem stated informally. If you solve the DNF with the extended LP formulation, you can show that you always hit the extreme points of the convex Hall. Then that essentially satisfies the rule. To give you a little bit geometric intuition, right? So here's let's say we have two disjunctions in 1D, right? So if you do the disjunctive normal form of these two disjunctions, you end up with this disjunctive normal form in the green region, okay? So we are not directly taking the convex Hall of these two regions. Instead, we are taking the convex Hall in the lifted space, right? So this eta variable is like the L1 distance to the to this convex hull, right? So what you have is essentially this region here. As you can see, both of these extreme points can satisfy the rules, right? So here we are minimizing the distance. Therefore, this point is the optimal point. It can satisfy the rules here. Okay, so we had an implementation in Jump using diffopt.jl. This is still a prototype implementation. We could have done it using DisjunctiveProgramming.jl, and it will be more modular. But here, Shraman had a very simple implementation. You can think about, let's say you have two rules, and you can either formulate that as a disjunction, or you can just use a binary variable to formulate that, and we will do the disjunctive formulation automatically for you. And the neural network layer is implemented using Flux.jl. Right? So then it can handle the input-dependent rules as well. So given this implementation, I will show you a brief result about this self-classification problem, just to give you some insight on how using some domain knowledge can help the machine learning model. Right? So here's the test F1 score on the test data set. And here we are gradually increasing the training data sets, right? Just to mimic what if you don't have enough training data, can you still use the rules to do better? Right? So this line is showing just using the rules, right? So if you just use the heuristic rules, it doesn't work very well, right? Because the rules is not ubiquitous to all the problems you have. Now, if you just use the base model, which does not have any rules, it is purely data-driven. It also does not do very well when the amount of data is low. But if you embed the rules with the base model, as you can see, we have the CNF, DNF type of formulation here. You can get a significant increase in the F1 score when you are in the low data regime. Now, the other thing is about constraint satisfaction, right? So by construction, the DNF always satisfy the constraint. The CNF does not rigorously satisfy the constraint, but for most of them, heuristically, it does satisfy the constraints. And if you use like a soft penalty-based method, it also does not rigorously satisfy the constraint as well as the base model. But interestingly is that as the number of training sets increase, you can find a base model will kind of pick up some of the rules, and then they tend to satisfy the rules as well. Okay, so that's a brief overview of this method. If you are interested in the details, you can check the papers. Recently, it was accepted into SAML, and the code is on GitHub as well. All the work were done by my PhD student, Shraman Paul. I'm just here to present for him. So with that, I'm happy to take any questions.